G'day once again, it's been a little while. I'm going to start on a new project. Springs, yes. I've got a set of lowering springs for the Camaro. Already got it on jacks, waiting to go. So just going to go through the process of doing the front and the back springs. And it's a pretty straightforward job, I think, but you never know until you get into it. So I will start without further ado. Okay, so there's two bolts, those two that are holding the strut to the wheel assembly. There's one that holds the sway bar. That's the back of it. You'll see the front of it. It's got a nut there. And just got to take off the ABS sensor. And that should all just be ready to come apart then. Now to do the whole front end, you don't need too many sockets. This bolt, 24mm nut, 21mm bolt. You've got two bolts, one for the brake bracket and one for the speed sensor, ABS sensor. They are 10 and 18 for the sway bar, which is this one here. And you've got 13 for the 3 bolts to hold the strut into the tower. I'm on the left side front, so we've got our strut assembly. One thing that isn't always clear is that this bolt goes through a slotted hole in the strut, and I believe it's about 2 degrees either way, plus 2 degrees to minus 2 degrees. So if you can imagine with the wheel on the ground, it's pushing that wheel hub assembly in towards the strut, which will give maximum negative camber. So if you slowly screw the bolt in, it'll bring the hub back and it'll reduce that level of camber. So just be aware when you undo those bolts, make sure you put it back to the appropriate settings by getting a wheel alignment. Has its own built-in washer. Too long. Put this bolt back in here so I don't lose it. I've never actually heard kookaburras going off like that before, so I must admit I'm a pretty... might just undo that brake line bracket too. Just to give it a bit more movement. I don't want that stretching the wrong way. So you see this one's loose. It's pretty much out. And you'll see the spline that I'm talking about. Pop that back in there for a tick until I get the other one out, because this is copper face copper's got a bit more weight behind it. There we go. It's all good. So depending on the angle, let's get that one. There we go. The suspension strut's now loose. Everything's disconnected from it. So now I just need to take off the top 3 bolts, which are these 3. So it's actually 13 mil. Leave these bolts up here so you don't lose them or mix them up. Before you undo the last one, just make sure you're holding onto the strut tower. And it's out. Just moving over to the workbench now. You'll see I've got a set of spring compressors, and that's what I'll use to compress the spring. To be able to remove them. Need to take this cap off first. There we go. Little cap. What size is that? Looks about a 14. I'm guessing a 14, but we'll confirm. So I'll just take up the slack first with this. Okay, that's what we're after. On the side. If I can get it there. If I get that one there, which is on a real angle. This one needs to come around a bit, which can happen, so. I'll do that. So the plan is to get the spring compressors opposite each other and let them do their work. Hopefully. Okay, so that was interesting. I didn't know how much compression I had on this spring and how much it was still resting on the strut, so I thought I'll take it outside, and then if it sprung out, if it popped, I'd have a nice big backyard for it to go flying into. But as it was, this cap came loose before the nut was all the way out, so I had actually taken enough compression off the spring to be able to take it out safely. I can do the other one with a bit more confidence now. New versus old. They look like they're slightly thicker, but certainly shorter. Now, okay, move the old spring out. Now, one thing I'm not sure about, they give you a shorter bump stop, so if it goes on, I'll leave it there for the moment. So that sits there. Okay, just need to give you a quick update on this. Nothing hard about this at all. The problem was the new bump stop. So this is the old bump stop, and the new one is slightly shorter than that, so obviously giving a bit more clearance for the lowered suspension. But this hole, the internal diameter, is really small in the new bump stop, which means it's hard to push down onto the shaft, which means it's hard getting this cap on. And I did get the cap on, but then I just had to hold this shaft with my hand while I did the nut up at the top, because it will spin. Let's try and do this one-handed. The shaft will spin and the nut won't tighten up. So anyway, it all worked out in the end. No drama, no difficulty. Just needed my own technique to actually get it all done. The new spring needs to be installed so that the eye back is the right way up. Make sure that the spring ends are sitting seated where they should seat, and everything should be okay from there. Now to put it back in. Okay, installation is just reverse of the removal. Here we go. Oh, looks like I got it first time. I'll put the first one in. There we go, the first one is in. The second one dropped on the ground. Okay, fortunately that didn't take long. They're all in there. I've just hand tightened them. I don't use the ugga dugger because it will over tighten them, potentially strip the nuts. Make sure you put the cap back in the middle after you've tightened up the nut. That holds the bearing to the top thing is a bearing, and that holds it to the shock, or the shock strut. So once it's tight, put that cap on, and then it's just putting everything back together down here. There we go. Okay, that's in. Get the sway bar strut. With the spanner I can feel if it's closed in or not. Don't get a lot of room. So that's closed all the way home. I think this pretty much has two. Done. So I think by design the IBAC label sits out up the right way once it's installed. These two bolts have been pushed all the way in and tightened on the nut. The strut for the sway bar has been tightened, as you saw. It has a hex head in the screw if you can't tighten the nut. The ABS has been attached. The brakes have all been fixed to the strut and it's all ready to put the wheel back on. So I've watched a few videos online with changing springs with the Camaro 6th Gen. One thing that I've noticed is they gloss over a lot of the key steps. The key one is the nut on that bearing at the top. So putting that nut on inside the cap, yeah, that doesn't necessarily go in as easy as some people might make out. I got it after a while by holding onto the strut of the shocker, and with the impact gun, it put the nut on pretty quickly then. Down here, making sure these bolts are in all the way, but not over tightened and not hurting the thread before tightening it up with the nut. Probably the biggest thing out of all is the bump stops. So I'll just sit down here and you can see these bump stops. That's the stock one. The stock one has got those grooves and you can see the size of the hole in that bump stop and the height compared to this hole is a lot smaller and it won't push down onto the strut, although that side is large. So what I've ended up doing is officially putting it in upside down so that one will press down into the strut a lot easier. I don't think that makes much difference. There's a tiny taper on one side, but it's rubber anyway, it's soft, pliable, so I'm not sure what the impact of that will be. Some videos I've seen don't even refer to this rubber at all. I don't know if they put the old one back in or the new one or completely forgot about it, but yeah, make sure that you replace it with the different size bump stop except for the mag ride, but this is for non-mag ride that I'm talking about. Apart from that, everything else goes easy. Now the rear suspension, to get that spring out, 3 sizes, most of them are going to be 18. So if you call this the lower control arm, that's an 18 on the nut and the bolt. The swing arm is 18. nut and bolt. We've got 15 for the sway bar. We have 21 to loosen off the cam adjuster nut, and that's it. 18 for the majority, 15 and 21, and that's all you need to get the rear spring out. Okay, just about to start on the right hand side, driver's side in Australia. So the wheel, the camber has got painted markings on it, which I'll use. Shock absorber bolt has got a yellow mark. This will be the swing arm bolt and nut to come out. The sway bar has got a blue mark for torquing up, which I can use because it bolts straight into the hub. So it's all straightforward. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. And loosening off the camber adjustment nut and having a jack under here to slowly lower it down before these bolts come out, so that the spring tension can be taken up. So I'll get into that and let you watch. First thing will be to probably remove the sway bar. There's one bolt to do that, and then the shock absorber. Both of those can come out before having to jack up the swing arm. You'll notice it's not really over torqued, so don't go crazy with a rattle gun or anything when you're tightening it up. A 15mm bolt. Take note of where it went, how it comes out. Next one is the shock absorber. Again, the shock absorber goes into a welded nut, so you don't need to have a spanner on the back half of it. It's the easiest way to do it. So again, this has got 11 yellow paint on this one, so that will easily identify the fact that it goes into the shock absorber, and there's no nut on the end of it either. So it's bolt number 2. At this stage, I'm just going to put my jack under it. So that's that. Now, as I said earlier, you need to just loosen off the swing arm bolt slightly, this one. Okay, that's loose. So now we've got the 2 bolts and nuts that hold the swing arm in place to the wheel hub assembly. So they're going to come out next. It's an 18. I think from memory it's 18 on the back as well. This last swing arm bolt actually has the handbrake cable interfering with the bolt, so when you're getting that bolt out, you just need to lift up this cable a bit, turn the handbrake off to make it a little more slack, and that'll get the bolt out without any dramas. This needs to be pushed down and sort of sit it underneath the boss that it goes through. It gives the bolt for the swing arm clearance to come out, because it'll actually hit this if you don't push it down first. There we go. And here's the spring. The top cap. You'll see the rubber cap, the bottom cap is still in there. It does have a locating tab which goes into a little hole in the swing arm. You'll notice there is a lot of dirt and debris that sits in there, so I'll give that a clean out before I put the new spring in. So we've got our new and old. There's not a whole lot of difference in, maybe a little bit of height difference. This rubber needs to come out to go onto the new. Now they say make sure the writing is up the correct way, meaning this is the top. That's where the tighter binding is on the springs as well. Make sure this goes in properly so the rubber sits like that. The bottom will sit in like that. Bring the spring down into it. Like that. So just putting the bolt in for the shock absorber, you'll know the shock absorber is under a bit of pressure, so it's going to tend to want to push out as I'm moving the swing arm up. So just by putting that bolt in it, it just leaves it in its correct position, and we'll put that in properly later. The first thing obviously is to get the swing arm in, this bolt, which was the last thing we took out. Then we can put the bolt in. Just reverse everything that was done to start with. So once those 2 bolts are in, you can then remove the jack, let the suspension down, because that will make it easier to get the sway bar bolt. So we're left with this that needs to be put into threaded hole. There we go. So just lining up the mark for our camber, and I'll hold it in place while I find the right spanner. The only other thing is the shock absorber, just to get that in. It's come through all the way. 18, found it. Okay, so we've got our sway bar tightened up, we've got our swing arm, we've got our camber, we've got our torsion rod, torsion bar, shock absorber. We're all done. We'll just put the wheel back on, and again I'll just leave the cover plates off these for a little while until I wash them. Can already see the difference, and I gotta say, worth the investment. So I just chucked the car back up on the hoist to check the suspension. Been for a couple of quick runs around the block, making sure everything's tight. I've now put these plastic covers back on after giving them a wash, so everything looks sweet. As I said, the camber bolts I've lined back up as close as possible till I get it in for the wheel alignment, but just checked everything else. It all looks fine. Never realised before the drive shaft on the right side is what, a little over 1 inch. The drive shaft on the left side is what, 2 inches. Something I never knew before. I guess that's where most of the torque is going to go. The right side normally lifts up, the left side takes all the weight, with the torque, so that probably makes sense. You can see my new suspension springs are in there. The only other thing, I've had to lift the car up by the thickness of a board just to be able to get it up on the ramp, or else it will slightly touch. So small price to pay, but it's all good. Just getting our wheel alignment done. The rear's been adjusted. It was out on this side a fair bit, which I knew about. I could actually see it, the amount of camber. Had way too much negative camber after putting the springs in, but that's been adjusted now. You probably see on that bolt how much it's been moved because I lined those paint marks up. So that's fixed it up now. And just on the front, to do an accurate adjustment, we need to get a bolt that fits that threaded hole, and that will allow the hub to move in and out against the strut while we tighten up those big bolts. But it's all going to plan. That's the front. So the front wasn't too bad, just need to clean it up a little bit more. Camber in both sides, almost 1 degree perfect, negative 1 degree. Just get that caster done, the toe in, we'll be right. There you go, 0.5 mil, toe in, 1 degree camber, and the caster's almost 8 degrees. All done. Well, that's another job down. As far as degree of difficulty, probably 3 to 4. It really wasn't that difficult. There's not many nuts or bolts or anything to worry about. The only thing is in the rear suspension, the lower control arm, if you want to call it that, and the swing arm, trying to get those bolts aligned, the holes aligned to put the bolts in, can be a little bit fiddly. Use the camber adjusting nut as well as the jack, and you'll find you'll be able to align them pretty quickly. But the first one did take me a while, and you may have noticed that I did edit some of the time taken to get those bolts back in, purely because first time I wasn't really thinking of the best and quickest way to do it, so I wasted a bit of time trying to finish that one off. But overall, fairly straightforward. There's no instructions. There's plenty of YouTube videos already. I just wanted to put the Aussie version in for what it's worth. And I've tried to highlight a few things that most of the videos I've watched completely overlooked. So hopefully you got something out of it. Make sure you do like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and tell your friends. Hopefully we'll have another video coming out very soon. If not on the Camaro, then it'll be on the old Tory. I've got to do a few things to that. I think one of the mufflers has collapsed inside. It's got a rattle, so I'm going to be pulling the exhaust off that next and trying to fix that, or putting a new exhaust on it. So we'll be seeing you soon. Ciao.